Stand for the invocation and pledge. Thank you for bringing us all together this evening. We pray that we make wise decisions that benefit the citizens of Canby. And tonight we can pray for the health and healing in our community and our country as we go through a health crisis. In your name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I would ask everybody to silence their cell phones at this time. So the next item on the agenda is citizen input on non-agenda items. This is your opportunity to talk about just about anything you want to talk about that seems relevant to what goes on here that is not on the agenda. Is there anybody that would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda? Okay. We now need to approve the minutes of the last meeting, which was January 27th. Is that right? Wow. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes for January 27th.
I move to approve the minutes of January 27th, 2020.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we have, Brian, we have no new business, is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, we have a public hearing, and to consider a request from Stafford Development for Todd's subdivision, that's SUB 19-03, application for 82 lots located at 1882 North Holly. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out the public testimony card. It looks something like this. And give it to the recording secretary right over there. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each. The opponents will be given 5 minutes each. And those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with the previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Sure.
I need to confirm if the company is also Stafford Investments LP? No? Okay, then no problem. Thank you.
Okay. Any conflict of interest on?
I live in the neighborhood and I drive near the properties when I'm heading out to the state park and on my commuting route to work, but that's the extent of it.
I too commute that way. I pass the property many, many times over the course of a week. So, also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact. So is there anything that's above and beyond what we've already discussed? Okay. So does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll get the staff report, then some questions from us. Then I'll open the public hearing for testimony. The applicant will have not more than 15 minutes, proponents not more than 5 minutes, opponents not more than 5 minutes each, neutral not more than 5 minutes each, and then about 10 minutes for rebuttal by the applicant. At that time, I'll close the public testimony. More questions by us if necessary. We will discuss and deliberate amongst ourselves and in public, and no additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter shall be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. We'll start with Brian. Or Sandy.
Ready?
Whoever is.
On the hot seat?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Sandy Freund, City of Canby Planning Department. And this is a request by Stafford Development to develop an 82-lot single-family residential subdivision, as stated in the intro, and is within the R1 zoning district, which is a single-family residential zoning district. The existing conditions on site are, well, the subject site is approximately 19.3 acres, and it's currently developed with a single-family home, some outbuildings, and a telecommunications tower. The predominant use of the property is agricultural, and again, it's zoned R1, single-family residential. This gives you an overview of where it's located. Hopefully you can see it in yellow. It might be hard to see for the audience, I don't know, but it's a large site, and it was recently brought into the city limits in 2019. The property was annexed, and it's part of the North Holly Development Concept Plan. It's the area in blue, and part of that concept plan includes all these properties, more or less, except for the southern part. This property is not within the city limits, or this property. This has been annexed right here, and this has been annexed as well. So this is the proposed subdivision and layout. It's going to have a major spine road in east-west, almost all the way through, but not quite, northeast Avenue, and a north-south, a proposed F Street at this point. The applicant has followed the approved concept plan as far as the street layout goes and the continuation of the streets from the side over here. You have Locust running north-south and North Holly running north-south. The proposed development will have 2 access points coming off of Holly, which is in the county's transportation system plan, a minor arterial. In the city of Canby's transportation system plan, it's a collector. The county gets the right of the conditions and how that street's going to be improved over Canby. And Locust Street is a north-south street as well, and that's in the city's TSP, and that is a collector street as well. The applicant will be required to do the necessary half-street improvements per the county TSP, the city's TSP, and the city's public works design standards. The applicant was required to submit a traffic study, and that's Exhibit D in your package, which is pages 70 through 171 in the whole entire Planning Commission packet. The traffic study resulted with a projected average daily trip from the project anticipated to be 764 vehicle trips, with 60 AM peak hour trips and 80 PM peak hour trips. And those are between specific timeframes during the morning and the afternoons. The traffic study was conducted in August, and because school is out at that time, they added with the city's traffic engineer, DKS, they looked at the small communities' traffic studies to count in the school year traffic. So that was all analyzed. So the proposal is within compliance with all applicable standards and criteria of the planning ordinance, and all criterion findings are listed starting on page 4 of the staff report. I'd like to go to another overview in a minute. Staff did send the application out to reviewing agencies for their comments, and those are found in your packet on page, it's Exhibit G, starting on page 187 of the packet, is comments received from the city engineer, Canby Fire, County Transportation, United States Post Office, Direct Link, and Canby Utility. At the time that this staff report was published, staff had not received public comments. However, staff did receive from an indirect email from another employee at the city an email on Friday, and we just received 2 more comments tonight, which I will read into the record at the appropriate time. And the applicant is here tonight as well, Levi Lavasa, representing Stafford Development, and he's going to be able to field some questions you might have. I wanted to go back 1 slide or 2 slides. There is a future city park north of the project, and so the applicant has created and designed these 2 cul-de-sacs that will have a pedestrian path leading to the park. Additionally, the applicant has requested 13 lots, an exception for 13 lots that are not meeting the minimum width for street frontage of 60 feet in the R1 zone. And they're a little bit less than 60 feet, so that's been conditioned, and that's in condition 46, and I'll talk about that. And there's various reasons why, mostly because of the layout of the roads, and also the cul-de-sac design does not allow them to get the right width, is what the narrative said. And there's a condition also that references those lots, particularly the pedestrian paths leading to the park, and fencing along those paths. The code requires fencing that's visible so as not to create a tunnel effect on paths, public pedestrian paths. And so the applicant will be required to provide the fencing for these paths. And those are conditions 56 and 57. And staff has revised the wording of both of those conditions slightly as to the placement of said fencing, and condition 50 also is related to those specific lots. And I'll go over that as well. You were handed out tonight a revised 56 and 57. And the conditions of approval are listed in section V1 of your staff report, and that's found on pages 11 through 17. So with that, I'm going to do a little housekeeping here. The comments received from staff and the bigger issues around this project tonight that's bubbled to the top is fencing. So we have put conditions in for the fencing on the cul-de-sacs. What came up in the email that I received, and I received a letter and another comment card tonight about fencing, is along North Holly. And North Holly will have a planter strip with street trees, the sidewalk, and then the rear of the properties that are be right against Holly. And I'll show you on the overview. So it'd be this area right in here, all the way down. The code does not require fencing along any collector or arterial streets, only along pedestrian paths. Therefore, we've conditioned that. I'm going to read what I received from the public. Susan Burkett at 2058 North Holly Street asks, please no 6-foot board fence along Holly Street. A nice 4-foot brick fence like on West Territorial would be and look very nice. And staff received another letter from Amanda Zeber, resident on North Holly, and she asked that Stafford Development construct a 4 to 5 foot tall brick wall along North Holly Street that could be aesthetically pleasing and also serve to reduce road noise from the traffic on Holly. The concern is that without pre-constructed wall, homeowners will build whatever type of fence they want, and visually it would not be aesthetically pleasing. It could vary. There could be gaps along North Holly, and also concern that there's no HOA proposed for the subdivision. So this will become part of the file, part of the record, these letters. And with that, based on the application submitted and the facts, findings, and conclusions of this report, staff recommends the Planning Commission approve subdivision, City Case File SUB 19-03, and exception EAS 20-1 for the exception on the width, street frontage of the lots, subject to the conditions of approval as presented, and including the amended conditions 46, 56, and 57, which I didn't read into the record. I just want to state that the amended condition 46, which originally did not include Lot 82, now does, and it mentions the proposed lots 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 30, 31, 32, 33, 45, 53, 81, and 82 are permitted to have reduced lot frontages of less than 60 feet. However, no lot shall be permitted to have a lot depth greater than 3 times the lot width. Conditions 56 and 57 were more of a shoring up of the timing of when the fencing would be put in for the properties facing the pedestrian path and the fencing that goes to the park. And the prescribed fencing shall be installed on the applicable lot prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Both those conditions, 56 and 57, are also referenced in condition 50, so that's the checks and balances there. We want to make sure that when the home building plans come in and we review them, that the fences for those lots comes in with those homes then and not at some future time, because that way we can assure that those fences get constructed accordingly. And that's the only latitude we have in the code for requiring the fencing. We do not have it for Holly, and that's going to be a discussion point, I'm sure. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I'm open for questions.
Okay. Any questions for Sandy?
Is there anything to be done with Lot 82 that doesn't fit the standard proportions, or is it just the intention to let it go?
So the applicant has revised the dimensions of that lot. So the code does not allow a lot to be greater than 3 times width, and we measure the width and the length by averages. And so the applicant did adjust the dimensions of that lot to get it back to under more than 3 times the length. So it's back in play, and that's why it's been added back into that condition 82. And this has been done on a few occasions in other subdivisions. And to answer Commissioner Mills' question about the tower, the cell site, that lot that the cell tower is on, from what I'm told, and we can check with the applicant tonight, will not be built upon until that tower lease is over and the tower is removed. And so the lot size you saw on the schematic, on the preliminary plat, was a little over 7,100 square feet, is the size of the lot, which includes the area of the tower.
Do we know the timing of that removal?
I do not. We can defer that to the applicant.
The last time when we did the annexation, when they came before us for the annexation, one of the points of contention was Holly Street itself, the condition of Holly, and how is that going to be resolved? Because they were only going to do. I'm concerned about the whole length of Holly as far as this development from Territorial down to 22nd. You just can't lop off this one chunk of Holly. And it's, that's an issue for me.
Right. Well, I know with this project, the applicant is required to do half-street improvements their entire property frontage. I can't speak to the overall improvements to Holly. That would probably be in the county's CIP project list. Maybe Brian can shed some light on that if he knows. I wasn't here when that was being discussed, but,
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
yeah, I don't know when the county's scheduled to improve that.
Question about the improvements for the half-street. Will those include curbs, plant
Yes, it's
walkways?
gonna be curbs.
bike lane?
6-foot bike lane, 6-foot wide bike lane.
It's actually an 8-foot bike lane.
8 foot, that's right.
That's what I heard.
8 foot planter strip and sidewalk along Holly.
Only on the east side, though.
Correct.
Right.
So the west side of Holly will remain in its present pristine condition.
Correct.
So, okay. I just wanted to be clear on what Holly was going to look like going forward.
What about Locust? Half-street,
Half-street improvements as well.
same as them?
That's right.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff? Okay.
Has there been, I'm sorry, has there been another development that you know of that has had the number of exceptions that are in this particular?
I haven't processed any in Canby. Brian may be able to answer that.
What I'm trying to think of is the main exception is the lot widths.
Yeah, well, and
that-
general size,
That
correct.
has been fairly common because the ordinance, for whatever reason, never anticipated the use of cul-de-sacs because all of these are around, well, not all of these, but most of them are the cul-de-sacs, which we find in any subdivision that we've ever done for the past 15 or 20 years, they never meet the lot width requirement. And so unfortunately, our ordinance didn't anticipate and put a specific exception for that. However, there are a couple of other lots that are included in here that aren't meeting the lot width standards, that aren't on a cul-de-sac. However, they are on somewhat of a curvature on the street, which contributes to that sum.
What about the lot size itself, the exceptions to the 7 to 10,000 square foot lot size?
That's pretty common from what I've seen, as long as it averages out to, I think.
Yeah, that's a more recent use of that provision that's always been in the code. Earlier years, people just generally met the standard for every lot. But more recently, almost every subdivision is taking advantage of the provision in the code to use lot size averaging so that on average, every lot is so that you can, and it also has a restriction, no more than 10% of the lots can be below or above.
Yeah.
So that puts a limit on how much of that they can do.
They meant that.
I have a question. The half-street improvement on Locust, and actually Holly the rest of the way to Territorial, is that included in it, or is it only the part that abuts the subdivision itself?
On Locust, only the part that abuts the subdivision.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
it's going to
then,
fall short.
on Holly, it's like what, the width of that last piece of property?
Right,
down to
all the way
end?
down, and then there's
So-
going to be a gap down to Territorial.
To the intersection.
Right, until that property develops at some point in the future. And same on this west
That
side,
side,
the Hemmerling
yeah.
property. This property here is not in the game,
Right.
not part of the UGB or annexed, so.
But that's unincorporated county land, and
That
it'll
is.
be there until,
Until they decide they want to come into
Property
the
owner?
UGB, that's correct.
Okay.
There's no provision for them to be able to expand Holly down to Territorial because that's a piece of private property below that, correct?
Right, so the requirement is only to the extent of their abutting edge of their property.
Well, no, I understand that, but I mean, even if there was a way to have them actually go down to territorial with it, we have another issue with another private property owner, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I have a question about why, I'm making sure I understand why planter strips disappeared off the cul-de-sacs. And I'm assuming it's because you went to the rolled curves, which could be rolled onto by a fire engine, and if there's no sidewalk to back it up, you might crack it out. But I'm looking for confirmation on why, because it's really, I feel, not going to be a very aesthetic-looking solution, what they've got there. There's going to be a lot of tarmac and a lot of slab and an extra width of apparently concrete. I'd love to see some kind of permeable material for the walkways. It's going to get pretty monotonous and hardscape there, and I'd love to have seen a little more creativity there. But is that why those planter strips went away?
When I look at the pre-app meeting notes, the rolled curbs was part of the discussion, but I did ask the applicant tonight, and I'm going to defer to the applicant to answer that. I believe that they had
Okay.
some
Let's wait for
answers
that.
there on that.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, let's,
Oh, he's got one
Just
more.
one quick one. Is there sidewalks on the east side of Locust running all the way down the developed?
Will just be for,
No, I mean, at this point, on the
At
other
this
side of the
point,
street, opposing this property, where the
Remember-
development has happened already.
I think there's sidewalk on
think
this
there
edge. Yeah, there is.
There is.
So across the street, yes, all the way down,
Levi's saying yes.
yes. There is, because I just looked at it on Google Maps this afternoon, but I had to recall.
any further questions? Let's hear from the applicant, please. If you'll step forward, turn on the mic, and state your name and address.
It's on.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Levi Lavasa. I am a project manager for Stafford Development Company. Our address is 8840 Southwest Holly Street, Holly Lane, Wilsonville, Oregon, 97070. Thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to present this subdivision application. Thank you very much, Sandy, for that brief overview. I'll try to keep my part of this short, but answer most of the questions that I've heard, hopefully in greater detail. Just to let you guys know, I think some familiar faces up here from last year when we did the annexation, and some new faces. But just to give a little background on what Stafford Development and Stafford Homes and Land does, I'm part of the Stafford Development side of things, and we are a residential developer, primarily single-family detached, and we focus most of our attention in the Portland metro area and just outside of the Portland metro area. We have projects ranging from as far west as Banks, east as Sandy, as far south as Mount Angel, and actually down to Salem as well for home building, and as far north as Scappoose at a time. So we do many projects, and we have done several in Canby as well, most recently beyond the annexation that we did last year. We also did a subdivision, the Beck Pond subdivision, which was part of the Southwest Canby Development Concept Plan. So this is our second time doing a development concept plan in the city, and we've become fairly familiar with the process, and this is now our second subdivision in about 3 years, I guess it would be. And we also have pulled some building permits on the home building side to build up some homes in the Redwood Landing neighborhood as well. So we love working in Canby. We like to do what we can to improve the communities that we work in, and Canby is no exception there. We try and do the best work we can in terms of planning. I think if you look back at the development concept plan we did for the Holly area, there was a lot of thought that went into it and a lot of citizen involvement, where the road layout that you see now for the subdivision was determined back then, really working closely with all of the surrounding property owners who were included in the annexation and those who were not. So just to clarify a couple of things, almost if you could maybe go back to the development concept plan area. So all of the properties between Territorial Road and 22nd Avenue and between North Holly Street and North Locust Street were included in the annexation application except for the very southwesternmost property. Yes, that one there, and then the two pieces of property that are outside the UGB currently. So the tax lot 302 is not currently in the city limits. The rest of those properties in that block are, and nothing west of North Holly Street was annexed either, so those are still in the county. So once we went through this development concept plan and we got the approval from the city council last year, we started doing a little more research and digging into the code and tried to find the best way forward to propose a subdivision on a road layout that had been determined by the development concept plan. So that's what you see before you today, 82 lots, and a few exceptions that you brought up, and I'll go in more detail on the reason for those. But first, I think, talking about the frontage improvements, that seems to be a big deal. North Holly Street is like Sandy said, a county road. It is a minor arterial in the county. The city has it designated as a collector. Clackamas County has, in the conditions that they proposed, required a 32-foot dedication from center line. We showed a 35-foot dedication from center line. It's their road, so they said 32, so that's what we'll be doing. Of course, that they include the provision in there, and we decide if that is correct or not. So ultimately, it'll come down to the permitting process, deciding exactly what that looks like. But what they've required so far is 20 feet of pavement from the center line, including an 8-foot bike lane and 12 feet for travel lane, and then a planter strip, curb, gutter, planter strip, and a sidewalk. So that's what we've heard discussed before. And then right along there is where the general concerns about the fencing have been coming up. And I had a neighborhood meeting with some of the surrounding property owners last Thursday, and we talked a little bit about it. And right now, we're not proposing any fencing as part of this application. It's possible that during the permitting stage, fencing could be proposed, but right now, I'm not planning on proposing fencing or any wall along North Holly Street. However, in order to ensure any future fences that are built along Holly are consistent, almost any builder developer includes in their CC&Rs fencing provisions. On top of the city codes that they must follow for fencing, we include in our CC&Rs something that dictates what fences you can put, and it ensures that there's a consistent look. And really it behooves the builder and developer to have a consistent look along project frontage and the project boundary. So it's in everybody's best interest, including the surrounding owners, to have a consistent look, but designs for what that barrier is going to look like are not in the works at this point. So I don't have any answers in terms of design, but CC&Rs are often one of our best tools to ensure a fence is built consistently if we don't build it ourselves, which is always on the table. We just aren't at that stage right now. On North Locust Street is entirely within the city of Canby city limits. However, it is still a county road. So right now, if you read the county conditions, it says that 27-foot dedication from center line, which is a county standard. However, currently the Public Works and City Engineering departments are working on taking ownership, maintenance of North Locust Street, as well as any other street that is entirely within the city limits of Canby, and that's citywide, and they're working on a proposal with Clackamas County right now to take over those roads in Clackamas County to fund the repair to bring them up to standards before that happens. So we envision, or we anticipate, and in talking with the city engineer, it is their goal as well to ensure that North Locust Street gets built to city standards rather than county standards, since the city will ultimately be the one that maintains it. And the improvements that we will be required to do and are proposing with this project will be all along our frontage. Again, that's because we have to dedicate a certain amount of property in order to get those right-of-way widths up to standards in order to build the width that you'd like to see on a city street. So right now, North Holly Street, I think, is a 40-foot wide right-of-way for most of it. It will be a 64-foot wide right-of-way in the end. So On our half of the road, the east side of Holly Street will be 32 feet of right-of-way width, which is almost as wide as the entire right-of-way is right now. So there will be a significant widening on our side of the technical center line, but there will ultimately be at least 28 feet of pavement, just how the west side of that road is right now, which is an improvement. So on the west side of that, we can't do that. Well, we're not going to be doing those improvements. Any future development on the west side of Holly Street would be responsible for those improvements. And it's just a proportionate share of roadway, and that's just the way that development works pretty much everywhere. Concerns about how that road improvement ends, that is always decided at the engineering stage of things. Usually tapers are the big question, is how long does a taper need to be, where you go from that width that we've now built it out to back down to the narrower roadway that's existing. And to the north, there is not any additional right-of-way for us to use, so oftentimes what the Public Works standards dictate are that we do a striped taper, just so bikes and vehicles traveling northbound on Holly Street don't just come up on a sudden change in pavement width. There's at least a line showing where this is tapering down to. And the length of that is dependent on the speed of that road. On the south side, adjacent to tax lot 302, when you get closer to Territorial, any improvements further south of that, again, largely dependent on the right-of-way available, and there's not a full right-of-way available there either. And again, tapers will come down to Public Works design standards, which we will be following throughout this entire project. That's one thing that I just want to make sure everybody knows, that we have to comply with the Public Works design standards, and we have to comply with the county design standards for the parts that they're responsible for. Jumping over to Locust Street, the county's designation of a local street requires 27 feet of dedication from the center line, and we are proposing 25 feet, so we're in line with city standards like I talked about, and I think we have support of staff and the Public Works Department to try and make sure that's built to city standards, and will ultimately be 34 feet of pavement with a planter strip and a sidewalk, just like on Holly Street, just a little bit less pavement for the ultimate total width. Right now, there's some power lines going along the west side of Locust Street, and those will not be relocated or underground because they are transmission lines. So they're 70-foot poles, and they are PGE poles. So those have to stay where they are. Anywhere that those poles might get in the way of a sidewalk, we'll be required and will propose an eyebrow for the sidewalk to go around that pole and provide an easement in the adjacent lot so that sidewalk can continue on uninhibited. ADA ramps per design standards will be included. I think the city is going towards more stringent design standards for ADA ramps, so those will be followed as well. Jumping over to the cul-de-sac, initially we would propose that the cul-de-sac or the paved width to be less than 48 feet during that pre-application conference, that notes that you probably read. Now it is proposed to have the full 48 feet of pavement width, but in order to mitigate some of the concerns with driveway drops, we are trying to come up with a solution with possibly a mountable curb or lowering the whole curb area just so there's not this up and down over and over again for driveway drops. Ends up being a problem for Public Works, and they like to be able to define where somebody's property line is. So right now, we're showing the curb-tight mountable curb situation on here, but again, that's something that will be decided by the Public Works design standards and what they're willing to allow or what they will require. So that's something that we have not talked in more detail about with Public Works or with the city engineer, but I'm hoping to do that early on so we know exactly what that's going to look like and make sure that we're following all the rules. I know the fire department was initially okay with the idea of less pavement, if I recall correctly, but had a few more concerns than Public Works did, so we bumped it out to the full 48-foot paved width, just to ensure that the fire department didn't have to go up on any curbs, but I know they like to have the ability to in those cul-de-sacs, so hopefully what we propose works for everybody. In the end, there's no more asphalt, or no more concrete than there would be if the planter strip was between there. It would break it up a little bit, but there's still the same amount of area behind the sidewalk now, technically, than if we were just to bump it fully into the easement. So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully at least a little bit, and I can clarify after I finish up explaining a couple other exceptions. They touched on the exception for the lot frontage. Lot frontage is typically 60 feet. The biggest deal is the cul-de-sac, both cul-de-sacs. And they're in the same location they were shown on the development concept plan, and the lots that we're proposing to have flags on 9 and so lot 10, which will ultimately be sharing a driveway drop if it doesn't end up being one consistent drop. We'll probably have a shared driveway. Lot 11 and 12 will probably have a shared driveway. Lot 30 and 31 will probably have a shared driveway. And otherwise, they should have their own, but that's just to help the constant driveway drop situation in the cul-de-sacs, unless we end up with the mountable curb the whole way. Otherwise, they are typically they are all along a radius. And that's lots 53, 82, 81, and 45. And the reason that we have reduced frontages there is because the radius just creates these sort of pie shapes in to a lesser extent than a cul-de-sac, but it ends up making it a little more difficult to meet those. That is. And so lot 82 and 81, lot 82 was the one that initially in the staff report there were concerns with the length to width ratio. After reviewing the requirements from Clackamas County for 32-foot dedication from center line, that allowed a shift of, so every single lot along Holly Street, based on the county's conditions, just gained square footage and gained 3 feet of depth, and that allowed the shifting of lot lines between 78 and 82, those 5 lots, such that lot 82 could come into compliance with that ratio of width to depth. So that was a big benefit from the county, only wanting to do 32 feet of right-of-way. Otherwise, it might have been a little more difficult, but I think we could have made it work. And so the condition as written that allows those lot frontages to be below 60 feet, I think captures any future problems and says you can't violate the 3 times deeper than they are wide, no matter what. So on the final plat, that's something that the planning staff will be able to review and confirm that we do in fact meet that standard. And I'm certain we will. Other than that, some of the big concerns that came up during the annexation that I just want to touch on was also had to do with the traffic in the area and all the surrounding roads and their condition. And I think that this new goal from Public Works to take over the maintenance burden of the roads that are within the city of Canby will help alleviate some of that. But ultimately, it's the future development that will take care of improving. I think 22nd Street was a really big concern during the annexation hearings, and that street should not be getting any additional traffic from these, especially in the condition it's in. Most people will not opt to drive down that road, but as development moves to the north, and if and when, then that road will be brought up to the appropriate width. And that's a situation where in many jurisdictions, if you don't have enough pavement in your half street, you're probably going to have to pave something over the center line to ensure 20 feet of travel lane or 20 feet of pavement. I think they might be able to do it without going over the center line up there, but ultimately all those traffic concerns about the road condition, I think will be mitigated by future development. And I know on Locust Street, there's another subdivision probably coming in shortly for the piece in the southeast corner on the Hemmerling property. And it will probably look almost exactly like the development concept plan as well, because it must. So hopefully there are no big surprises here. This is something that's been adopted by the city, the development concept plan that is, and we've followed that roadway pattern perfectly. So otherwise, if there are any questions, I'm available to answer.
Any questions? for?
Yeah, track D as in dog,
Yes.
to be developed at a later date. What's the story there? I don't understand.
Yeah,
You got
so
a
that
3,000 square foot triangle there
it
that's
is a
kind of
unique
sitting
story.
there dead.
Yeah, so that's the roadway, how it is shown there is exactly how we had it in the development concept plan. And in the future, if the owner of tax lot 500 wanted to sell part of their property or buy tract D, there's enough room there for one more lot. And we, in our early stages of the development concept plan, we had shown counted that as a future lot for a traffic study. And so just in the future, it could happen where somebody might want to use part of tract D and part of tax lot 500 to make one more lot.
And in the meantime, it will be
In
dirt?
the meantime, it will be owned by either us or somebody else that lives nearby, I'm sure. I mean, it's a benefit to have.
Okay.
It can ultimately help you have a lot that doesn't have to use Holly Street as a driveway.
Any questions in here?
I have a question.
Jen?
Lots 44 and 45,
Yes.
between there and the agricultural area, will there be a fence there? I don't see it listed here, but,
It is not proposed as part of this, and I don't envision proposing it during the permitting process, but I do anticipate at least some fencing along there. When homes are built, that's typical, but I can't say for sure right now.
and then the fencing that's to be on the tract B and tract C corridors, for want of a better term, will that be similar on tract A? Will there be one?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So that fencing plan shows required fencing
On both
along-
sides of
Just
43?
just on the one side. And I don't have any, I'm not including in this proposal any of this fencing, but I think on the other side, it would probably go along with future development. And if it's a see-through fence, it doesn't help much for the protection of what's over there anyways.
Right.
But I mean, we may want to come in and put a perimeter fence all the way around. I just don't know right now.
Okay.
So I have a question in relation to, you talked about the CC&Rs, but it's my understanding there's not an HOA. You guys have not proposed an HOA in this development.
No, and we probably will not propose an HOA. CC&Rs, yes, but an HOA, there's no common property or common anything for them to maintain.
Yeah, well, the CC&Rs, I mean, obviously, if somebody moves into the neighborhood, I mean, who's to have any jurisdiction over what they do?
Their neighbors.
If there's no HOA though.
Right.
So-
No, it is, I understand, and we talked about this a lot at our neighborhood meeting the other night, the concern being exactly what you're talking about. And really it comes down to if anything's violating a code, then it might come up to a neighbor that they're also violating CC&Rs. So enforcing CC&Rs is difficult. It is all about the neighborhood and what they're willing to do on their own. And the neighborhood could always come together and form an HOA, but it's not often that people want to pay a bunch of money for a third-party management group to do very little, except for tell them once a year somebody might complain about a fence. And it just gets expensive, and you have to have an account set up for if they're going to try and enforce things and collect money. So it just complicates it a little bit more than we like to force upon owners now.
Well, I would actually disagree with you on one account, but I didn't actually like HOAs to begin with.
Yeah.
But I also see the benefit of them in a lot of neighborhoods around Canby,
Right.
and how nice they've maintained them amongst the neighbors themselves without the interference of code enforcement and
Right.
the city of Canby to be involved in that. or neighbors actually, having to go to the city to complain about certain things. Sometimes it's best handled within the community.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it, but
Well, and you can also form an HOA and assign board members to it without hiring a third-party management company. But then that just takes someone that's willing to be in charge. And I don't always feel like we need to be the ones that to tell them that someone needs to do it. Otherwise, then we're just kind of overseeing them indefinitely as this, just as the developer, you end up being the one that's supposed to enforce things. And unless we're told, we don't go and police a neighborhood for something.
okay, and so one other thing, in regard to the fencing along both Holly and Locust, you guys aren't anticipating doing anything there?
Right now, no.
Because it seems a little odd to me that you would have the construction of these homes and then no fencing whatsoever.
Oh, I am certain there will be something, but I have no idea what that's going to look like right now.
Okay.
I got one question. So you keep kind of talking about open-ended. Are you planning on constructing on this development, homes? You've had a lot of comments.
It depends.
You've had a lot of
There's a new
comments
guy.
about
State
it
your
could
name.
be-
I've been watching you sitting over there and going, I just want to get up there and say something.
Yeah, okay, yeah, my name
So-
is Gordon Root, and I'm one of the principals of Stafford Development. And God bless Levi, because he doesn't want to commit to spending money that we don't need to or have to. But if you look at Pine Meadow and Franz Meadow over on Pine Street, you'll see fencing, masonry, entryway, subdivision monumentation, and we put in there fencing with brick columns and arborvitae in front of it. Obviously, that's the marketing window to 82 homes. And we absolutely come in and understand that that has to look good. When you have your full pavement width plus your bike lane plus your planter strip with street trees and your sidewalk and your fencing, yes, it needs to be really pretty. It needs to be dressed up. Is there a fence standard planned at the moment? What we're trying to do within the company, and I had this conversation with Brian this morning, is we just got to standardize the monumentation, standardize the fencing. It's all going to be the same, so it's not a decision we have to make over and over again. It's just what we do. So there will be nice fencing along Holly. There's no question in my mind, because that's the way you sell homes and create a sense of place in a neighborhood. Insofar as, I'll make just a couple other comments while I'm here, but we avoid fence anarchy inside, not just on the perimeter, by putting in the CCNRs. Because, fence anarchy is when you decide to build one style fence, you decide to build another, you build another, and you want to paint yours yellow. No. It's a standard 6-foot cedar fence, solid boards. It's got the cross members and a cap on it. It is a very attractive fence. You can see exactly that fence down in Beck Pond right now. And fence the whole perimeter of the site. People like their fencing. And here we've had to, along the fences that border the park, had to agree to a see-through fence, because it's all eyes on that park, right? So the people who live along the park, to create privacy, they're going to have to create some sort of planting or natural vegetative corridor or buffer between them and the park. But that's part of the joy of living next to a park, is it's like living next to a golf course, right? You're able to see it. The cul-de-sac and the curb and the mountable curb, yeah, I'm a real fan of mountable curbs. I think they work really well. It's a very consistent theme. You don't have the ups and downs, but we have to defer to engineering and public works on those all the time. Insofar as Councilor Mills' suggestion about impervious surfaces, the city won't accept us doing that because of the long-term maintenance. They want a durable path that's in there, usually of asphalt or concrete. And that's just what works long-term. You don't have to come in and maintain any type of, a cobblestone path or a paver path or whatever you do in there. And
City code also encourages the use of permeable materials, though. So you're saying we don't permit it, but our code encourages it. So which is it?
Well, I will defer to staff on that, which is it.
Good point.
If I may, there are different departments as well. So Public Works is charged with maintaining and taking care of those things, so they have one standard that helps them the best. And then I think oftentimes in planning, and maybe that's the case here, but I know it's happened elsewhere that I've worked, there's a vision for something in a comprehensive plan type of situation where they're saying, we want to encourage this and encourage that. But then it comes back to public works, where we have to be practical about it, and how much money do we want to spend paying for that long term, because it's ultimately going to be owned by the city. So I know there's a balancing act, and there's often things that conflict, so that may be what's happening here.
Yeah, I might just add real quick, about 8 years ago, we adopted the low-impact development standards, and the Public Works Department was completely on board with that idea at that time. We constructed several public streets that utilized permeable paving and such. They worked great for a few years, and then they didn't work so great. And so...
So we don't have solutions right now?
So we're not promoting public streets with permeable paving anymore.
These are pathways.
I know. And so we haven't gotten down to that fine tuning at this point, but we're not using them in public street situations.
Okay, so I'm
any
still
longer.
going to stick by my guns that permeable materials could be used for the pathways. There should be a middle ground between you and Public Works that would work.
Whatever will work there. I mean, we want it obviously to look like, to be a nice community, well-maintained, which brings up this HOA. Quite frankly, this is the first time I've heard we're not having an HOA here. And 9 out of 10 communities we do have HOAs. I think the reason why Levi's probably opted, you can tell me here, no HOA, because Track D is the only common area maintenance. And, you know, the HOA management companies charge $450 a month at a minimum, and then come in and charge all these dues, et cetera, et cetera. However, we do have planter strips that need to be maintained. So likely, this will evolve into an HOA.
And the monumentation, I would think, would also
Right.
need to be
There's going to be
maintained.
things that need to be maintained. And I think it could be a self-governed HOA. It just requires someone to step up, and it keeps the dues really low that way.
You say that you believe that there's going to be a fence there. I'm still kind of wondering, what's the proposal? I mean, there's no
There's,
proposal.
believe it, be a fence along Holly?
Yeah.
There absolutely will be a fence there. They're unequivocally, those are rear yards of homes that back up to.
But what type, you
thoroughfare.
said it's going to be nice, I'm just
There
asking
will be a
for
street.
clarification
I
of
mean,
what
there
type
will be
of
a
fence.
fence there. Well, we have, I think if you go over here and look at it in with Pine Meadow and France Meadow, it's a masonry monument and then an opposing corner that's masonry as well. And that transitions into a 6-foot cedar fence with a cap that's stained, that on the frequency of about every 4 panels, there's a masonry pillar. And then in front of the cedar fences, we put arborvitae. So you get this multiple depth and multiple texture all the way along there, and then what you see visible is the arborvitae and the masonry.
So I'll go back to my question. Is Stafford planning on building the homes in this development?
We do and don't. We plan on building when we start with building home with every single development, we set out, we're just going to go and do it until someone wants to buy. And we do build homes. We'll build about 80 last year. We're going to 150 this year. And even when we sell lots, like we did with Beck Pond, we immediately bounced over and bought lots from Icon right over here, Redwood Landing. So how many of those are we going to build? I don't know, because if there's someone that comes in and says, we don't want to build next to you, or we want to build next to you, and like we said, well, we kept arguing about how many we're going to keep or not at Beck Pond, and then the decision became none, because that's what the buyer preferred.
So where I was going with that, Brian, is that a second time that they come so that everybody could get their answer on what type of fence, or if it's a concrete or whatever? Do they have to come, if somebody else buys those lots up, don't they have to come in and submit some sort of a plan in general on how the fencing is and standards?
That's a private action. We have no involvement whatsoever in who builds the homes, whether they sell them or not.
No, I understand that, but don't their standards set when they have to build them?
So if we're requiring a fence, I'm assuming
Yeah.
then that they're held to the same standards.
Yes, so the issue would be the CC&Rs that they've talked about. That's something that we can control and you can control here, and there can be a provision. We will look at the CC&Rs, otherwise we don't enforce them in any way, but we can look to see that there's a provision in there that indicates that a certain type of fence will be required, and whether it distinguishes the internal ones versus the external holly frontage fence, if we think we want something different between those. And so those can be done through that method in the CC&Rs. The best way to assure common, consistent fencing where you think it's important is when the developer builds it. I mean, that's clearly
Like now.
the easiest and most best way to make sure that happens.
Because by code, we can require it.
Yeah, and part of the drawback that I've heard before is that, well, then that's potentially a common feature in the subdivision that's going to need, over time, long-term maintenance. Therefore, probably would be a reason to do an HOA. And so that's why some developers don't propose to build the fences.
Sure.
Because it almost is an automatic HOA if you're going to have the developer build the common wall.
Well, I remember that we had, it's the one over on 13th, right? So they had the concrete wall that was going up, and then there was a neighborhood right next to that was coming in, and so it was similar to that, where they were going to try to, they thought they may, if they had to, match it. I think we asked them to match it so that it was consistent across there. So did we make any of those same things on Beck Pond, because you referenced Beck Pond?
No, there were, is that on? Yeah, there were very few perimeter fences out there, and, I just say this is our marketing window. I mean, we understand what we're doing to try and sell 82 homes. People want to have something that looks good, and the only thing I can really reference is the fences in front of Pine Meadow and Brands Meadow. They're beautiful fences. I mean, they're stained, 4 panels, arborvitae, masonry columns, masonry entries on both sides of each of the entries.
Well, I don't have any doubt that you guys do good work. I've seen it.
That should
I think
be-
the question is when you actually, if you sell the lots, where's those restrictions on whoever buys those from you? Right, is the thing, is you may have the best intentions in the world, but if you don't actually build that across Holly, and whoever's building it doesn't like the fences that you put in and doesn't stain them and doesn't do anything nice, right? I think that's what the discussion's around.
I think that, to go back, I think that, the walls go too far, and the intermittent columns are a very good compromise. Worked through this with planning in McMinnville, here, everywhere else. It's a good-looking fence.
Yeah, I'm not referencing that, I know that, as far as that they have to be the brick walls or anything like that. I think what the concern is, in general, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we want something.
How about
But there's
masonry
no-
monument?
there's no guarantee.
Corner markers and a masonry pillar every 4th fence panel that's a stained fence.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody's looking for, is if there's a standard that's going to be put in there, so that whoever buys the lots has to build to
Yeah,
that
so we
standard.
can go with that.
If I may, just to
'Cause that's
clarify.
what we build anyway.
I guess we're negotiating a design here, and I think it behooves you to come to us and tell us what you think it is and show us. Instead of saying, well, we don't know if we're going to do it, if we are going to do it, it might be this, it might be that.
Yeah, maybe-
You need to tell us what it's going to be, what you want to
How about
propose.
this? We're proposing, absolutely it will be fenced. A 6-foot cedar fence, and every 4th panel have a masonry pillar that's stained.
If I may interject, Commissioner Mills, if you want that to follow this subdivision, then you and the commissioners may want to think about
Adopting an amendment.
Adopting a new condition that requires the developer of said subdivision to construct fencing along Holly that would be cedar fence or similar material with concrete or masonry pilasters every fourth
But
panel.
My other point
Blah,
is
blah,
that they're here to present what they want to do.
Right.
And they haven't presented the materials or visuals or anything to show us what they want to do.
So in.
They should do that.
Right.
You
and
should
so-
do that.
Right, and so in my experience, if we get a condition requiring them to do so, then it's, the planning staff ensures that the fencing is going in as conditioned. If you mention that you want the brick column every fourth panel, and the panels will be cedar fence material, and the condition's written as such, then it's incumbent upon staff to make sure that that condition is fulfilled accordingly. And so that covers it, so they don't have to spend time to design it and come back, let's say, as long as we get the condition saying that they're required to do so.
On this development.
I think the big thing is that we come up with a consistent design standard as opposed to defining exactly what that standard is. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, is that we just don't want it to be a mishmash. But we also don't feel like we need to hog tie you into any particular design or another. We just want to make sure that there's consistency over the length of development.
That fence will be put in all at one time. It'll be very consistent. And like I said, CC&R dictate the internal fence. We do not want fence anarchy. We want continuity and a very attractive marketing envelope into the community.
And I appreciate that statement, and I just want to emphasize that I'd like to see a little more effort on your part in presenting your ideas and visuals to us, and not being totally reliant on staff to make all the visuals. You need to come and tell us what you think you're going to, what you want to do, and what you think is the best way to go.
Point well taken, and we'll bring photos part of the PowerPoint next time of Pine Meadow Grant.
Any further questions for the applicant? Thank you very much, and I'm sure you'll have some rebuttal time coming up. Let me see, we have, thank you. Jason Monacuco. If you could state your name and address.
Sorry. I'm Jason Monacuco, and I live at 334 Southeast 13th Place, Canby. I'm formally asking the Planning Commission as a condition of approval that each house, as each house is being built along the entire north property line, including the city park, a 6-foot residential wood fence should be built prior to occupancy of each home. Monacuco Farms is farming along the entire north end of the property line, including the future park. Our farm equipment will be working in these fields. Our farm equipment is large and hard to see around. It can be a danger to animals and kids if they're wandering in the field. Some of the land is certified organic. We cannot have homeowners dumping yard debris, spraying, weed killer, or running their pets through the fields. Organic fields require 3 years of no chemical use to be certified organic. If a non-organically approved chemical is used, we'll have to wait 3 more years to get the land recertified. And we can't have homeowners' pets, pooping in the field on the vegetables for food safety rules. We just don't want possessions of stuff encroaching on the land. That's basically all we're asking. And I didn't know that there was a provision for having a fence that has to be see-through along, the park. So I didn't know that ahead of time. That's all.
So could you restate what you're asking? I'm sorry.
Formally asking the Planning Commission as a condition of approval that as each house is being built along the entire north property line, including the city park, that a 6-foot residential wood fence would be built prior to occupancy of each home.
So would it be fair to say that now that you're aware that it needs to be a see-through along the park line, that you're just really asking for fencing along lots 44 and 45?
Yeah. I mean, if it has to be, but 42, but I think they had it on there, there's going to be
Right.
a fence. But if that could be along 43, could be a full, fence, like the cedar fence, that'd be better because it's not along the park.
So would you be planning on posting some signage somewhere along there asking
No sprayers?
no spray, no dumping of yard debris,
Yeah.
So that would be your responsibility
Yeah.
for doing that?
Yeah,
And
we
you're-
can do it. I mean, people do what they want anyways, so,
Are you kidding?
yeah.
When did that start?
So, yeah, I mean, we can do that for sure, but anyways, whatever you can, if it works, it'd be great if you, so.
But there is a fence, my understanding, there's going to be a fence there anyway, so.
No, it's 45 and 44.
Okay.
And
The top
43 was gonna be
north lot,
see-through.
Right.
But the fence that's going to be along the park is like cyclone, is that
Chain
correct?
link, yeah.
And as such, then sprays and things like that would actually just go through that. But we're talking about along the property lines, the north end of the park area, what would go in there at some future time? To
The
divide-
northern boundary of the park?
Between the park, yeah, right along there, correct.
Oh, I don't have a crystal ball.
Well, no, I'm just wondering, what is the standards for if there was a park built
It's
there?
a city park, so they can do what they want.
Yeah, it would be up to the city. For the paths, I know the standard for the code, the paths has to be some sort of see-through fence.
Always see-through?
Right, but where the park abuts, if there ends up being residential development there in the future, then it would be similar to this, where it has to be see-through facing the southern side of the park.
Right.
But we don't know what it's going to look like yet.
And that proposal was staff's proposal. It's not in the code because of the nature, the narrowness and smallness of that city park. We felt like if it was completely walled off from all adjacent development, it's not a good thing.
Any more questions for Jason?
Thank you.
Thank you. He was other. Okay, Mr. David Gordon, please. Doesn't have you down here as pro or con, so. And we have props. So if you could state your name and address, please.
Good evening, you all. My name is Dave Gordon. I live at 2146 North Holly Street, which is 2 properties north of the Dodds, where Tommy Dodds lives, right there. We've lived there for 34 years, my wife and 2 girls. And so like John, I go up and down that road all the time. I'm here with 3 things on my mind to make a plea. First, second, to share some observations, and third, to ask some questions, a lot of which have been asked tonight, and I'd like to reiterate some things. The plea is for you people as commissioners to seriously consider aesthetics and amenities and beauty in all of your decisions and all of your thinking. I think it's very, very important. Canby City Maintenance Crew, I know some of the guys on that. They do an excellent job of maintaining the parks and things in Canby, and I'll get back to them in a minute with a specific question. I'm fully aware that amenities and aesthetics bring in no money. They cost money. And it's a value I have, obviously, because I live right out there, and I think it's very, very important. Number 2, the observations. That street, Holly Street, is different than other streets in Canby that have fences and walls or whatever. It's an amazing road. The observations are that many, many people, joggers, bikers, walkers, people with their babies and their dogs are up and down the street all the time. But more important than that almost is the out-of-town people that come and go across the ferry. It's an attraction. The Swan Island Dahlia Farm, of course, the flower farmer with the miniature train, the golf course, the state park that's out there. It's used by lots of out-of-towners. It can be a tremendous advertisement for the city of Canby as people go up and down that road. And I think we need to be thinking about that when you're making a final decision or expecting these guys with their fence along or their walls along Holly Street. Keep that in mind. The third thing is the questions that I have. I took a bunch of photographs a couple of days ago. These are identical. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see two houses up there on the corner of where Territorial runs into Holly Street. There's a subdivision up there right across from the Methodist Church. Those are not the front of those houses. Those are the backyards of those houses. There's no fences at all. And I wonder why that is. Who decided on that? They're very pretty. They look like the front of the house. You go around the other side, that's where the driveway is, and the main big yard is on the other side, an inner road, like this would be here. Who decided that? There's no fences at all, and that's an amazingly pretty solution. It doesn't give you a backyard if you're a homeowner, so I can understand why there's hesitancy to put something like that in there. But I think that's something to consider. Who decides that, and how did that come about? Secondly, I've seen the Pine Meadow homes on Pine Street, and it is very nice. Who maintains those arborvitae that are growing out there? Because it wasn't that long ago that the city had to come and clip back the arborvitae that was growing out onto the sidewalk, actually into the street down there on South Ivy, across from Lee School. That looks hideous. There's some of that in those bottom pictures there. In addition to that, any kind of wood fence, regardless of how many pillars and concrete and brick pillars are in there, is going to deteriorate. It looks very nice now. It doesn't take long. You can look at the pictures on the left to see what happens to cedar fences. They fall over. They're rotten. It's a mess. The irony of some of those pictures is that right across Southeast 13th Street, from where I took those pictures of the cedar fences, is that beautiful stone wall at the top with those shrubs that are maintained up there. Who decided that? The developers? It had to be, because they're all identical. Another question is, who maintains the shrubs that are in there? Is it the property owners? Is that because there's an HOA? Does the city maintain those? They're very nice. They're almost right across, they are right across the street from those board fences on Southeast 13th Street, from Ackerman School on down. Another question. Isn't it true that neighborhoods, that I've observed anyway, just generally tend to deteriorate over time if you don't have an HOA? HOAs are pains in the rear, I'm sure. I've never lived under one. I live out in the country. But it just seems like without an HOA, things just go to pot pretty quickly, like those fences. As people are coming up and down Holly Street, as opposed to 13th, and even Territorial, so many people, whether they're local people or out-of-towners, are just going to see Holly Street as a representation of our town. As you come in from the south up 99, right in front of Safeway, there is that beautiful city planting thing that says, "Welcome to Canby, the garden spot." It's very, very attractive. That brings in no money, but it's beautiful. It makes people think there's something here, and maybe indirectly brings in money in one way or another. People want to come here and shop here. If Canby is the garden spot, and we want it to be nice for people, all those things that I mentioned out Holly Street, the Dahlia Festival, I can't even get out of my driveway on Dahlia Festival time. The Gitzes come over and apologize to me. I say, don't worry about it. It's beautiful. I look right across the road at the dahlias when they're in full bloom, and I greatly appreciate all of that. The flower farmer with his train, the ferry, and what's the other thing I'm thinking of that's out there? They're attractions to our city. and it's an opportunity to showcase our city for people that are out of town visiting. Why don't we just take advantage of that? Let's show off our town with the best possible fence. I'm suggesting not a fence at all, a beautiful wall. I told Levi, you show up with carpenters, we're going to scowl at them. If you show up with a bunch of masons out there and they're working like crazy, the neighbors out there will feed them cookies. We'll cheer them on, and we'll root them on. Go for it, guys. Like that top picture at the Dinsmore Estates. That's where I took that. That's just beautiful. The fence, I don't know who maintains those, the bushes on the side. But that's the way our town ought to look. A nice big wide strip there on the other side of the sidewalk.
I think all of those are actually HOAs.
And it must be.
Yeah, because once they have that fence and then those shrubs and.
And I'm you know, it just showcases our city, and it gives us something to brag about. So that's my plea with you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Gordon? Okay, thank you very much. You did the artwork yourself.
Yeah, that's great.
No, I'm talking about the smiley faces.
Yeah. Okay.
Good job, Dave.
Yeah.
Good job.
How about Richard Monacuco? Please state your name and address.
Hello, my name's Richard Monacuco. I live at 1335 South Larch Street, Canby, Oregon. I'm a representative of Monacuco Farms, and my question is, when they do the widening of North Holly Street, our business, we have a lot of semi-trucks traveling up and down North Holly Street, and just a concern of ours is if they do the development and the construction to the street, how are we able to get our semi-trucks up and down to our farm? If you go down Locust and on the 22nd, they can't make a right-hand turn on 22nd, and also on 31st. It's pretty hard for a semi-truck to make it around those corners. So
Making a right-hand turn going
towards
south.
South on Holly and
Okay.
on to 27th.
Or no, it'd be going north, because right-hand turn, we're going towards the ferry.
Going towards the ferry,
Yeah.
and you're talking, you can't make a right-hand turn on
Well-
the 22nd?
No, off of 22nd, back onto Holly. So if you come down North Locust.
You mean if the road was closed?
If
for
the
some
road was
reason?
closed,
I
yes,
see, I
if
see.
Holly was closed. And you
Nice.
have,
Yeah.
and you have Locust, if you go down Locust and you turn left onto 22nd and then right back onto Holly, there's a telephone pole there, and it's hard to make it around. And all we're just looking at is if we can have still access through Holly Street while they're doing construction, or how are we gonna get our semi-trucks to our farm? That's pretty much the only thing I have. Also, with what my brother said, having a solid fence along the north property line, along all the farm ground, is a big benefit to even the homeowners there, because of the type of work that we're doing with all the big machinery, the spraying, what we do. We have organic ground where the park is, and that there, yeah, we can't have people dumping stuff in there, like yard debris or walking around in that field, in any of our fields anyways, if that matter. But just, those are just some concerns that we have.
What do you currently do to discourage folks from doing just that? I live directly across from the entrance to the Dahlia Farm, but if you go around the curve up, you have a farm, you have property kind of just in back of me there on 22nd. There's no fencing per se there. So what do you do to?
Well,
I mean, what's your current system for discouraging that?
Currently, we try to, on organic pieces, we have signs up that say no spray, this is organic. But like in certain areas, there's already some fences already there, and we talk with neighbors and tell them, hey, you know, we can't have you in here. And if we do see people, which it does happen because people do what people want to do, and we have to go over there and tell them, hey, you can't be on here, this is private property, you need to leave right away. But that's just if we see them going on to that property. And during the summertime, like, we have fields that people drive down, they think that they own the place, and they drive down there and park in them and go swimming in the river. And we have to figure out a way to get them out. We have a fence there that says no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted, 2 big signs, and they drive right past it. So, I mean, we just try to verbally tell people to not come on our properties. There are places that if there is no fence there are some neighbors, they just won't put a fence up because they want to see the farm ground, but there is a road separating us from their house. And so that's a definitive separation. But where this is, there's no road there. It's going from yard to dirt. And that's where our farm equipment's going. And if someone has a young child running around playing in the backyard and we're out working our ground and we have big pieces of machinery, we just don't want to see them get hurt, you know.
So you're talking about the road, it's a gravel road, right?
Yes.
On 22nd?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be clear. That was one of the reasons that, you know, that was a real concern of ours, of the planning commissions, when the annexation portion of this came up, was exactly the condition of 22nd between Holly and Locust. So, yeah. Okay. Any questions for Richard? Thank you very much. Finally, we have Ms. Susan Myers.
Good evening, my name is Susan Myers. I represent Monacuco Rentals. We own the 9 acres to the north that's part of the concept plan. We support this development. We also, I don't need to repeat, but we also support everything that Monacuco Farms just presented this evening. My comments, having lived in a couple neighborhoods with HOAs, I just wanted to comment that CC&Rs are effective for the developer when they're developing, but it's not so helpful for the homeowners that live there once development is over because enforcement's very difficult. And this neighborhood would not have a lot of common areas, so it would be easy for them to self-govern. The one thing that hasn't been touched on is the lot with the cell tower. I believe the cell tower's lease is in perpetuity, and I'll let the developer talk about that. But I believe the lot would not be developed until that lease was terminated. So if it does go on for many years, how is this lot going to be maintained from weeds and that type of thing? So I'm wondering if that piece of property, not exactly where the tower is, but the remaining lot might not be common area for the HOA or for the neighborhood until it can be developed. And then I wanted to also point out not only the wall, but signage, as was mentioned, lighting for the signage, the neighborhood mailboxes. While they say they're property of the United Postal Service, actually they are the responsibility of the neighborhood to maintain and replace as they age. And the planter strip along Holly, those are all things that could be easily managed over time. The one thing I'd mention about a mason wall versus mason pillars, I don't really have an opinion either way. The one thing I would caution is that the mason wall, if one is done, if they're often have too small of footings, and the grade change is often different between the street side and the home side. And over time, the walls start to have issues because the columns aren't being keyed in to the rest of the wall. the footings are insufficient, and we have many examples in town. Willow Creek, Postal Estates, Tofty Farms, there was no rebar used. So these walls need to be constructed to hold up over time if a full mason wall is built. And I've talked to Jerry Nilsine about that, as I've had to deal with several of the walls.
Isn't that what recently occurred at Willow Creek, is that they had to replace
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, same reason.
And
It's
Postal
trees,
or
roots.
Tofty Farms, we had issues, and we knew none of the columns are keyed into the wall. The footings are insufficient, so any trees that are near it can compromise the wall. And Postal Estates has several large breaks in the wall that they're dealing with. So it is a recurring theme in town because we haven't had a strong enough standard for a mason wall. But if you did decide to go with the mason columns with cedar fencing in between, if it is maintained by an HOA, then it could be stained to be consistent, the cedar portion of it, and replaced at the same time to look good. Where you run into problems is along like 13th Avenue in South Canby, where there is no HOA and the house is back up to 13th, and there was no standard or condition of approval, and the developer put up just a wood cedar fence with a real deep planter strip. It looks really bad over time because the homeowners don't maintain it consistently over time. And when they go to replace the fencing, yes, there's CC&Rs, but nobody's enforcing it. So I'm glad to hear that they're willing to commit to a design and hopefully to an HOA. So I would encourage the Planning Commission to do conditions of approval and encourage an HOA. And in addition, I think there should be design standards in our code that deals with this, because in several places in town, we have had these no-man lands that are created, and it was a real point of contention on Redwood, if you recall, when that development came through. And if it was in our code, then they would come in with a design because they would understand that it is expected, and HOAs would be created because you would be requiring it so that these walls are maintained.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions for Susan? Thank you very much. Okay, that's all the testimonial slips that I have. Would the applicant like to take advantage of the 10 minutes for rebuttal or add in anything that crossed your mind?
Just want to reiterate, there will be fence standard in CC&Rs. We did talk about the perimeter fence on Holly. There's none on Locust because those are front yards. And yeah, I think that Susan made the point about what happens when people say about aging masonry walls are less likely to be fixed or replaced, but within the CC&Rs that we do have in an HOA, we actually wrote into McMinnville, brought up to me that the fence had to be replaced in all the panels by the HOA. I forget what the duration was, but it has to be stained every 3 years, and it had to be replaced every 8 or 12 years, somewhere in there, to maintain the fresh look. And yes, we'll have the HOA, the traffic during construction. Richard brought it up. It's traffic control, part of the traffic control plan. The other lane of Holly will be open at all points in time. They won't have to detour onto 22nd. That is, the other lane, and we just use flaggers on both ends of that road and keep an open way the entire time. And on our footings on the pillars, we actually drill down so that not only do you have your footing, you have, a pylon basically going down so that they don't move. We know how to build those pillars really nicely. Lease term on cell tower?
Yeah, so I'll touch on cell tower. And first on Holly Street for traffic control, that'll be Clackamas County, so we'll have to submit a very detailed traffic control plan to them, and they'll approve it all beforehand. It's not just a last-minute flagger on each side. There's specific signage, specific distances, and it'll all be taken care of so traffic can continue to operate correctly. And they also have time restrictions on when you can do certain activities and how long. So that'll be taken care of. And regarding the cell tower on Lot 44, the lease for that is complicated. There is no definite end date, but there are extensions to the agreement that continue indefinitely until some action by one or both parties. And so it can go on indefinitely.
That would not be action on our part.
Right.
And I'll say that one of the things, I'll probably co-own that cell tower with my partner till I die, the way it is, because I thought, well, wouldn't it always be great to own a cell tower? Well, you wouldn't believe how little rent comes off of it, and to reroute the telemetry and the power is going to be years and years and years before we break even on keeping it. Yeah, and then fence along 45 and 44, absolutely, it'll be 6-foot cedar fence next to the farmland. We always fence the side yards of the houses.
Yeah, and we could do it
especially along the cell tower, yeah.
and the north of Track Day, as long as the city is okay with it. I mean, that's, and then at the end of those streets, though, that's generally up to Public Works, what they allow at the end of dead ends.
Just for clarification purposes, the fence that you're proposing across the north side, is that the Good Neighbor fence you're talking about, or is that a solid cedar panel?
Solid.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, because I think that that's probably.
But remember, along the park, that
Right.
is not, yeah.
So even that east side, actually, along the back of those properties is still a regular cyclone? Sandy? I'm kind of looking at you.
Yes, behind lot 43.
43 and
43 and 42, yes.
Or a 4-foot solid.
Or a 4-foot
So
solid.
there's
It's in our
options.
code, so they have to meet one or the other.
Yeah.
With condition 56 and 57.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And something that was brought up that I think would be helpful, and possibly if it was put into the code, would be provisions for what classification of streets different types of boundary amenities are required on. A lot of other jurisdictions have that, and we come with prepared diagrams and show what we're proposing, because that's what's required. And I think that is something that would be helpful to consider in the future.
But even without requirements, we put in a nice fencing.
Right.
A nice perimeter fencing always.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, just back to the tower property. So one of the questions came up is who would maintain that property?
We will.
Like
Property owner.
mowing and that kind of
No,
stuff?
we'll maintain it. We have to own it.
Because you're going to own the, okay.
Jeff? No, it's okay. It's okay? Jennifer?
Yeah, just on the cell tower, and I hate to even open this, but I'm going to. Since we've had discussions about cell towers in the past, we've always had them when we're bringing a cell tower into an area, not when we're growing up around the cell tower. And is there any concern that we need to have with setbacks or anything, or is that something that your engineers have already looked into as far as cell towers in a residential area?
We've sized that lot appropriately to accommodate the cell tower and the generators that it has to go with.
And any
And they have their lease area.
setback and if it falls down or, okay. Just
Falls
didn't
down.
want to not address
Sure,
that.
sure. Any other questions?
Light pole's going to be strong enough to hang a 5G transmitter on?
Oh, jeez. Are we gonna really open this up?
Incorporate them into the masonry pillars.
That's a good question, actually. So,
Boy.
thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
They're going to be shaped like eagles and they're going to be on the masonry
Yeah.
pillars. And we can get a real good rumor started.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Sandy's shuddering
Thank you.
over there.
Okay. Okay, so at this time, since there's no further testimony, I'm going to close the public testimony. Any more thoughts or questions that you might have before we move on to making a decision?
I do have a question, and because I don't recall seeing this in the code. We can't require a development to put it in an HOA, can we?
No.
I didn't think so. That
So I
seemed
crafted a
really
condition for
inappropriate.
when you're ready for it.
Yeah.
Can require a permanent fence, though.
Yeah, yeah.
No, no.
No.
No, we can't require the permanent fence unless it's along the pedestrian path only.
I'm just reading the sentence here, the planning commission may require site blocking or noise mitigating fences for any development if reviewed.
Your mic is
That's
not on.
correct.
Thank you.
Yes, the planning commission has that latitude to do that if you so choose, but in the normal course of a review, we cannot require an applicant to put the fence up unless the planning commission decides to go down that path.
Right.
Right. So in that instance, yes, you can. And I've
Okay.
crafted a condition that
I understand there's extra
summarizes-
liabilities for us to do that, but
Right, it's on the planning commission to do that, that's correct.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of thoughts here, and I'll start off with a few.
Okay.
One is the mention of the cell tower, and we have ongoing maintenance on these lots. We're talking about the lot where the cell tower is at, but I'm looking at lots that are probably going to be, I'm going to say impossible to sell or build on until that cell tower is gone. I'll just say it. So you're going to have a lot of perpetual ongoing maintenance on empty lots that aren't going to sell till that tower is gone, or till you come up with something really original. So that would be one comment I would have about ongoing maintenance on this thing, whether or not it's through CC&R, HOA. We obviously can't require an HOA, but that would be a concern that I have, and so I'll mention that.
Derek?
I'm still confused on how we go about the fence thing. Is that a recommendation we got to put into here?
Yeah.
So if you recommend to do the condition, and you can recommend the creation of an HOA as well as part of that condition,
Yeah.
that's what comes out of the recommendation and decision, and then,
Well, I think that Jeff mentioned that he would like to see, and I know that I would too, a rendering of what that would look like.
Well, I guess I got out my little political soapbox and I beat up on the applicant, and I apologize for that, gentlemen. Please accept my apology for coming on a little hard there, but I think sometimes we've gotten in the practice of applicants becoming a little too reliant on staff to make their presentations for them. And I think you need to come in and make your presentation too, because there's some things like the fencing, like the visuals that you have in mind that you could show us, and it would help us. That'd be the one comment that I would have. And there's another one I've got, but I'll get back to it in a minute.
What did you say? I didn't hear you.
I've said I've got another one, but I'm.
Well, you're right, though. It would make it a lot easier for us to be able to see that and to be able to say, oh, yeah, that looks great. Even the pictures that were brought in
Yes.
on the boards, that was awesome because we could actually see, oh, here's a brick wall, here's a stone masonry.
So, you
compared to
referred.
these cedar fences that are rotting.
You refer to other developments like this and that, and I must tell you, I don't know what those look like. I mean, so you're referring to something that I don't know what it is. If I can't see a picture of it, then you're telling me basically nothing. So I got to keep that in
Maybe
mind as
that's
you're trying to refer to things.
Something that we need to look at as a commission is to put in standards of how we want that transition piece to be, like other cities do.
Yep.
And that way,
Yeah.
they know to do it, because right now, there's nothing that says they need to do that.
right.
So I think that part of that is us being remiss in not having that available. And I think in future times when we
the planning-
have no meeting,
You're talking about
that
for
we
the
can
planning
do that type of
department
thing.
itself. Yeah.
Well, I'm confident that they'll put in a nice
Yeah,
fence, but like
right.
Jeff, I want to see what it looks like.
So, and I guess I have one other comment about HOAs, okay? And we've talked about, a lot of people have thought how good they are that aren't in them. And, I've been a home buyer in the past, the first thing you look at is HOA, $450, forget that, okay? So I just would offer that, one of the things I recall seeing in the public meetings was that they were hoping to target these prices at high 3s to 4s. Okay, so these are moderate-priced houses, and if you're going to slap a $400 or $500 HOA on top of that, that makes no sense. So I think we need to be cautious in saying, well, we'll cover this, or we want them to make an HOA, that's fine, but if you start adding a bunch of money to this, one of our duties as a planning commission is to make sure there's affordable housing in this town. One of the ways to prevent affordable housing is to put $400 a month surcharges on via homeowner associations.
Jeff.
Now, let me finish.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I understand that we also have this other conflicting and very important criteria that we want to make sure the city looks good. And we need to do things to do that. So it's a balancing act, but that is a reservation I have about just saying, okay, a HOA will solve that problem.
There's no amenities in here that would ever cost $400 a month. I will guarantee that. So in terms of an HOA. So $400 a year, potentially, but not per month. So just to have a brick wall and some shrubs out in front of it that they would have to hire a landscape maintenance company to come out and maintain is relatively inexpensive. And I'm talking from experience in 2 different HOAs.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that being that there is no amenities except the cell tower lot, and that'll be a lot of fun for kids to play on, I'm sort of wondering how they're going to, that particular lot, so that was a question that I didn't have until we started talking about this, but how they fence that off, or is that just going to be open to kids to be playing on this lot? Or,
They show a fence.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on over there. I haven't seen it. I haven't been on this property to know if this tower has a nice little ladder for kids to climb, or if it's a playground kind of thing.
Yeah, there's cell requirements, yeah.
Restrictions around that from a cell tower
Okay.
perspective.
I
Because
just
of the
wanted to make
generator.
sure.
Yeah,
I'm like,
there's fencing.
what's this look like? So, anyway, but I guess the point is, really, from an HOA standpoint, that literally would be the only thing that would be maintained in there, that the people would be responsible for actually pooling money to be able to maintain. It would be an awfully nice brick wall if it was $400 a month. So it's not going to be anything like that. So I don't think that should be a hesitation for us or anything for us to be concerned about if we were to make an amendment to just have a masonry wall over there. Because it does, based on the pictures that we saw, it does look really nice. There are other neighborhoods around town here that also have done that, whether it was solid masonry or brick or whatever it is. Susan brought up a good point about the way that wall would be constructed. It would be nice for us to see 2 things. 1, how is it going to be constructed? And 2, what is it going to look like? So a rendering in terms of a photo or something. So it's a little difficult, even at this point, for us to move forward and say, oh yeah, approved, let's rock and roll, without that. Because of what we talked about before, that the next buyers that could potentially buy this may just stop 3 houses in and then do their own cedar fence after that. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have a plan in place, that could change and we'd have 3 different fences down Holly. I'm not sure about that.
Then we'd have, what do you call it, fence chaos?
Anarchy.
Fence anarchy.
Fence anarchy.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go.
That's not what we want. So we need something consistent, I guess.
My thinking at this, and what I'm going to propose is that we delay a decision until we get some of that visual,
I'm going to disagree with that, not with you, because you know it. But I think that it's something that if we don't have that as a standard and a requirement that they need to meet, I think that's something we should look at moving forward for future developments. But I think right now, if they've met the requirements with the exception of the few conditional improvements with the fences that have already decided, the lot width, things like that, that I think for us to throw up fences in their way, I mean, I think maintaining that they have a consistent fence line along Holly, I think that's something that's appropriate. I think that if we start getting into the weeds, into deep detail on, build it with this color brick or use that color fence, I think that's beyond the purview of this commission.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
I would disagree with that as well.
I think it's important that the design be consistent and that we get a look at it. I don't think we need to specify colors or materials or anything like that. I think there's a lot of variety in the way that these things can be constructed in a way that'll appeal to us. Being in maintenance myself, I can assure you that if there's not a plan to maintain whatever kind of masonry holds this thing up, codified, it won't hold up, because nobody's going to volunteer to hire a mason just to fix a pillar when the neighbors on either side aren't going to have to. And so I kind of think that if we're going to mandate any kind of masonry, especially because it's just going to be outside the realm of any kind of homeowner to deal with, you're kind of stuck with something. And you know, we can let them just, they want the HOA to be, you know, managed by the members of the community, or if they want to hire it out. It kind of depends on who buys and whether they're, you know, community-minded people and how much time they have.
Yeah, and something like this would be very simple for the community to maintain. There's no swimming pool there, there's no amenities, or really, for that matter, a park yet, you know, which is something for the future. But it's just not out of the scope of 82 different homeowners that could probably put that together and make that happen. So I don't think that it's a problem.
So, Brian, is there a way that we can, because I agree with Jennifer that we didn't have a stipulation that said you had to come with a picture. I think we should. I think it should be in our code. But is there a way that we can still get that requirement without delaying?
Well, you can certainly make the requirement for a fence,
Yeah.
and you can make it in a way that you actually want to see those designs. You don't have to see them now. You can see them at the construction period. We can bring them back under new business, show them to you, and go back with a recommendation back to the developer.
So we wouldn't have to necessarily bring them
So-
back in. We would just have to see the plans
Yeah.
at some future meeting.
Yeah, we could pass the construction set of plans that have a fence page and let you review those, and you can comment back to us as we comment back to the developer.
Well, that seems like a good,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think,
Compromise, really.
I'm pretty sure Stafford wants to build more in Canby, right? And so I don't think that they want to go on public record saying they're going to do something nice and then have something bad. I mean, that's not going to help them.
Okay. So,
but like a lot of people, I am concerned about the longevity of that, and especially with the road that it is. People brought it up that it is kind of a road, somewhat arterial for people to be traveling into Canby from across the ferry. So good points to consider.
I thought that there was any way to leverage the county to do the entire length of that development on Holly. I would be in favor of that, but that's not their responsibility, and the county doesn't care. So, how would you like to proceed?
Did you say you had drafted a potential,
I did draft a potential condition, if you would like to hear it.
that would be the,
Iron it out a little bit. So
Regarding
regarding the fencing and NHOA, the applicant shall construct a 6-foot-tall cedar fence with masonry columns every fourth panel along the entire project site frontage of North Holly Street, as well as create an HOA for maintenance and replacement of said fencing, all landscaping strips, and Lot 44 until tower removed. Along those lines. And then we could require the applicant to come back between now and construction plan review with their proposed design.
Is there anything that needs to go in for along the Monacuco properties?
Oh, and yes, I can add to that a solid 6-foot fence, cedar fence, shall be installed along the northern property lines of proposed lots 44 and 45 and tract A.
one adjustment perhaps, instead of saying the 4 panels with the masonry, a minimum of, in case they decide that they want to do something more elaborate, or,
Sure.
you know,
That's
we don't
perfect.
want to say this is the only thing you can do, because they may come up with something that's gorgeous and cost-effective, and that we don't want to limit them to.
This is in cooperation with an HOA, is that what we put in there?
Yes.
as well as create an HOA.
Yeah, okay.
And can we do that? Can we require HOAs?
Yeah, that's kind of where we were at before.
We're not
is
sure.
We're not positive. I tend to think we
If the applicant
can't,
is
but
agreeable
I
on the
think that they're
record, I
fairly
think
amenable to that,
we're
right?
okay with
I
this.
don't
Sounds
think they
like
have
it,
a
so-
problem with it.
Yeah.
Then we
That's-
would end up on
that's
an
great.
appeal at city
And the
council.
reason, though, is very, it's been pointed out already, and the cedar fence isn't going to last very long. And when it starts looking bad, that's where the HOA comes in, because each independent homeowner, it's a little tough to make everybody do something with the fence. But if it's an entire homeowners association, they would just replace the whole line of fence at
Well,
one time.
but that's not what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to
sorry.
have an HOA, we're not asking the HOA to do anything in particular.
No, but the HOA, what I'm
So-
saying is generally HOAs, they have dues for a reason, obviously, to
Right,
replace and
and-
repair and maintain and keep those things looking nice, so.
And some are better than others, but I think that's something that they said that they would probably discuss in the CCNRs is the
The
maintenance of the
CCNRs would
fence.
always reflect the
Right,
HOA.
right, but we're not saying, and the HOA has to paint the fence, or stain the fence every 3 years, or repair it every couple
Oh,
of years.
that's a really good idea.
All we're saying is that we are requesting that they have an HOA. We're not saying what the HOA has to do.
Right.
The HOA could say, you know what, we just are gonna gravel over all of the flower beds. And there's nothing we can do about that, because that's not what we're asking them to do,
As long as it's within the planning department guidelines, we can do whatever.
which is,
I've managed probably 50 different subdivisions
Yeah.
going in with masonry walls and cedar fencing along scenic corridor highways and whatnot. So usual that we don't require HOAs, or that they're not a common practice, rather, because of this particular reason. This is the issues you run into, is the maintenance. That
So-
aside, in my experience, they present a very nice project.
But see, obviously, our reason for being here is to watch out for all of everybody else that lives in the city of Canby, right? And so this is why we're here, and this is why we want it to look nice
Right.
and for everybody else. And obviously, everybody's bringing concerns here, so we want to pay attention to that and do
oh,
what they want.
absolutely. So that's why, what I said earlier is that if we're going to have concerns like this, then we need to address it on a code, what our standards are overall, and not do it piecemeal by each person that comes in here. I think that what's fair to the developers is to, and to the people in the community, is to have standards that people know what they're looking at when they walk in the door.
Exactly.
Instead of, oh, wait, no, yeah, I know you've been working on this for, 2 years, but now we're going to throw this other thing in there, where if they looked at that, they could put that in their plan and put it in their budget. And there are things that that based on state law and land use, we can't require and we can't do. So we need to make sure we're within our guidelines as well.
Well, that's why 100 years ago, all of the planning department rules were on a sheet of paper, and now it's a book.
Also, to reference Monacuco's concerns about the traffic flow, there is a condition, number 13, that the applicant has to provide a haul route that goes and gets reviewed by Public Works and whatnot, so look at that.
So, I'll entertain a motion to move forward with the conditions that are already in here, the 42,
46,
46.
56, and 57.
With those changes to 46, 56, 57, and the additional.
The additional condition.
And the additional condition.
Do we have a number for that?
We can make it 58.
There you go. So somebody's got to make that proposal, so.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we will render a final decision on this very same thing. Want to do it again?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay, I move that we do a final approval of Dodd subdivision sub 19-03 with the changed conditions on 46, 56, 57, and to the new condition of number 58.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Items of interest from the planning staff. That's,
Is it on the agenda?
Well, it indicates that as far as I know, we're still planning a presentation to the city council as we did similar with a work session for you on the 5G small cell technology.
They've been a little busy.
And then we've got a list here that we are holding a regularly scheduled meeting on the 23rd of March. And we've got I don't know if you've been paying attention to the Caruso produce was appealed from your decision, and the council, very interestingly, never opened a public hearing for it and remanded it back to you.
Regarding paving?
The Half Street improvements.
Yeah.
Yeah, the half-street improvements from Malina Road is the only item they appealed. And so that's the only thing that the council indicated that you can even consider. You can't change your opinion about approving or denying or anything.
Any other thing.
It's only deal with the two conditions of approval that they wanted to slightly reword.
So did the appeal come from, where did the appeal come from?
It came from the applicant.
From the applicant?
Caruso Produce.
Okay.
They felt like that was going too far to require the improvements, and their appeal statement will elucidate that to you when you read that as their reasons.
And that'll be at the meeting on the 23rd?
Yeah. And then we have another subdivision. Right now, they're calling it 17th Avenue. It's 8 lots across Redwood, North Redwood from Redwood Landing. It's actually in the Postlewaite addition.
okay.
As long as we require an HOA.
Yeah. Any items of interest from us to staff? Jeff?
Yeah, I'm going to bounce off of what Commissioner Chundi suggested about the lack of, I would say, good standards around perimeter fencing and transitions. And I'd suggest that we put that on as an item for a future work session for the commission, so we can work on that.
Some code amendments.
Code
We
amendment.
have a growing list that we will
Yeah.
be bringing to you, and
Yeah,
that's
cool.
for sure needs
So,
to be
yeah,
on there.
I don't know, I want to make sure, I offer that should be on the list.
I'll add it.
Maybe it's the reason, maybe.
I might mention that, at least a personal observation, is that although there may have been some hints at a need for that in the past, it wasn't readily there in front of us because our past developments have all proposed it up front.
Yeah.
And said, here's what we're going to do. And so it never became obvious that we needed the standard because they've always proposed them up until now.
Well, and I think that some of the things that came up tonight, that maybe it's a good thing they didn't propose it because we got more feedback from the community of, hey, this is tipping over, or this doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And so, being able to provide some standards. And it could be that, if they're doing a successful way of doing it with the pillar into the ground and the pylon, I think he said, things like that, then those might be things we want to look at adding into our standards and let their engineering do the work for us.
And the bad examples were definitely obvious.
That any developer that comes in front of us can, like they did with that ponds, they can sell every one of those lots.
Right,
And they won't be
Right.
the builder.
And that's why you want to condition it, because
right.
the applicant could disappear, and all of a sudden you've got a
Well, okay.
project that's not holding the applicant
Right.
responsible for that.
Should that happen, then, do we have to have some kind of rendering of what the fence is supposed to look like? I mean, how do we go about that then?
That's trusting staff to understand what is being proposed and
Yeah.
enforce those conditions, because there typically are those types of requirements in a code, and that's something that we would implement and make sure it's followed through with.
Similarly to, only a certain percentage can be garage, things like
Exactly.
that.
Right.
We don't look at every piece of property that
House
comes
permit that
through
comes
here.
through, exactly.
But we do
and go,
have-
Oh, we don't like that facade, but we like that facade, and
But
no, we don't
some,
like the
yeah,
blue door.
basic understanding
That's
of-
beyond what we
yeah.
do. We just have the standards and then
And that's-
count
right.
on our planning department to handle that.
And I guess I wanted to add one other comment about, I kind of was a little tough on the applicant, and it's staff's fault because they paid for my training. And one of the things that the trainer told us was that, I'm sure that, was that he feels like applicants need to make a presentation, and they shouldn't rely on staff wholly to make the presentation for them. And once again, I failed to thank you guys for your hard work. Well, the camera's on, or hopefully maybe the camera's still on. So anyway, you guys do a great job, but I guess I'm of the mind that we should be pushing these guys, these applicants, excuse me, to make more of a presentation themselves. And I think tonight was a case in point where they had ideas, they had images, they were ready to, but they didn't have anything to present.
I think it's part of the whole growing pains that the city's going through. It's
Yeah.
moving to a point now where that does need to happen, and more professional presentations and so on and so forth as time goes on. And so we're hitting that tipping point now.
Well, especially the developers selling us the envelope. They're selling the outside of the balloon. What goes on inside, would go through piecemeal, but when they sell it to the community, they're selling the exterior of the entire package.
And remember, if they don't present visually a good product, they're going to eat it.
Right.
So they have skin in the game too.
Right.
So we have to kind of balance that out as well.
And if we're going to ask for more of a presentation, then we need to look at the structure of the meeting because we do only give them a limited amount of time.
Most applicants typically get 15 minutes.
Yeah. Right.
And they're used to this. A lot of
Right.
consultants are used to that.
It's normal, you'd give them 15 or 20 minutes to make a presentation.
It's a nice package.
We need to start
We've never
running our
cut
clock more
anything.
frequently.
They could give us a design in the packet. They could just have a
Yeah.
page that says, this is what our fencing is going to look like running through point A to point B,
And-
and that would be plenty.
To a point, we're never going to be able to have enough rules to cover everything that's going to pop up, kind of like this cell tower thing, right? So there's always going to be something that's just going to pop out of the woodwork, like, oh, this is new. What are we going to do about this? And that's where we come in, right? Is to kind of come up with something and decide on what that's going to look like or how it's going to go.
But we could
Within-
certainly anticipate more subdivisions along collector streets, and so
Yep.
therefore it'd be nice to have a standard.
Exactly.
Okay, anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're-
And if you needed a second, I seconded that.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.